Here with Congressman Larry Bucshon. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's been a busy week in Congress dealing with a number of deadlines this week and some issues that are going to get pushed down the road here a little further as moderate and progressive Democrats go back and forth on some of the details here. Where are we going to wind up?
Well, I think ultimately, we're going to fund the government, and it'll be up to the Democrats who are in the majority to probably raise the debt ceiling. Unfortunately, our spending has been on a pathway that the debt ceiling probably needs to be raised. But in general, the majority party in the Congress does that. And I wish we didn't have to do that. We need to get our spending under control. But I think, we're going to do the blocking and tackling of government, primarily fund the government. I think probably, not for the entire fiscal year. And I think your viewers will see that. But I do think that we will not have a government shutdown, and we won't go there, at least this time. And I think the government will be open.
Is this a matter of kicking the can down the road once again? And why do we always seem to be back at this place, no matter which party is in charge?
Yeah, that's true. No matter which party. And the reason is because I think the budgeting process is broken. I think, first of all, I think we need a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution to force the Congress to balance our budgets. Most states have that. That also has resulted in out of control spending. Honestly, both political parties, we've only balanced the budget maybe 4 times in the last 60 years. But we have a situation where we have to have what's called an appropriations process, where you have to pass individual bills, 12 of them, to fund the government. And we just can't get agreement between the two parties about what the priorities are. And we haven't really for decades. And even if we can in the House, the last time the US Senate passed appropriations bills to then fund the government in the regular way has been many, many years. So the process is broken, and the two parties really have pretty broad disagreements on the priorities. So we end up with these continuing resolutions funding the government based on previous agreements that we've made in the past. So that's the reason. I don't like it. It's not the right way to do it. But it's not up to people like me. It's up to our leadership on both sides to get control of this and to get a compromise where both parties can vote for it.
Infrastructure has been one issue where at some level the parties have been able to compromise. It's something you and other Republicans have talked about in terms of its importance. There was a bill that passed the Senate on the bipartisan basis, in the House this past week, likely to have some impact here in Indiana. Are there aspects of this bill that you support? Is this essentially a protest vote against it?
No, I don't vote in protest of anything. There's reasons for why I support or don't support legislation. In this case, they did link it to their $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill, which I don't support because it's dramatic, out of control spending and changing the social fabric of our country. So that's the reason the infrastructure bill has struggled. And the reason, it's too bad because we do agree on infrastructure, as you pointed out. I think across party lines. I was on the infrastructure committee for a couple of terms, and we couldn't get an agreement. We were in the majority, Republicans. We couldn't get an agreement on a number of things. The biggest issue is how we fund it. And, the Highway Trust Fund, which is funded by the federal gas tax, has now been underfunded for really a couple of decades. And we can't get an agreement about how to get more money into infrastructure based on the lack of funding at the federal level. The state of Indiana has done a great job with that. A number of years ago, our legislature passed an infrastructure package that really has done well for the state. But at the federal level, it's difficult and frustrating. But all of us know we have infrastructure deficits. The current bill doesn't put a lot into most of the priorities that I would have: roads, bridges, the airports, and rural broadband. And, it has some funding in there for that, but a lot of it is for climate change related issues and honestly funding priorities in larger cities with transit that have already received tens of billions of dollars in the Democrats' American Rescue Plan. So we just can't come to an agreement.
Would this infrastructure bill, would it help cities like Evansville and Terre Haute in the end?
Well, more money always helps everybody, right? So that's the case. But if not done properly, you find that the policy is the issue. They may not get as much money as you would think because a lot of the money is diverted to other, priorities that are not related to the cities or towns or communities that I represent. A lot of it directed at large urban areas like Chicago, New York, and other places. Look, they need money too, don't get me wrong. But, more money, sure, we could always use more money. But the reality is you also have to pay for these things, right? It's like your family budget. I mean, it's an insatiable thing. Everybody wants more money in their family budget. But at some point, you have to recognize, well, if you don't have the money coming in to support that, support what you're spending, then you just can't afford it and you have to make decisions based on that. And that's what the federal government needs to do. What are our priorities? What are the things we need to do? Let's fund those. And let's quit blowing the family budget out of the water like we've been doing.
All right, let's talk about the pandemic as well. Our numbers have been starting to crest and come down, but we're still seeing hospitals overwhelmed across the state. A number of hospitals, including Deaconess there in Evansville, now getting support from the National Guard. You've also posted graphics from Deaconess showing how the vast majority of COVID patients there are unvaccinated. One person on social media responded to you saying, "I get your point, but unfortunately your base doesn't want to hear it," in their words. Is that the problem here as you see it, base voters in your party who don't want to get the shot?
Well, I think what, Republican voters don't like is mandates. They like individual choice and freedom. And I support that. I think President Biden's mandate through OSHA that is going to mandate that businesses left with more than 100 employees put in place a policy that he supports. I don't think that'll hold up in court.
But to be clear, there was already a great deal of hesitancy amongst base Republican voters before these mandates were put in place.
Yeah, there's hesitancy for a number of reasons. As you know, you follow me on social media. I was a doctor before. I think most of your viewers know that. I think people should get vaccinated. I think the data is pretty clear. I posted on my social media. Most people who are hospitalized in the intensive care unit or on a ventilator are unvaccinated. And statewide data just came out that shows that roughly 98% of people who have tragically died in the state from COVID are unvaccinated, based on data over the course of this year. So I support vaccination. I think it's safe and effective. But I also support people making individual choice for themselves. But if you do that, there can be consequences to that. But that's the American way. The issue, I think, with a lot of the voters is that they don't trust the current administration, as it relates to the FDA and CDC. And I understand that. I think it's misplaced. But also, another group of people that didn't get vaccinated a lot turns out was our African American population, and that was because during the campaign, the current president and vice president disparaged the vaccine because it was developed under President Trump. So I think there's a lot of blame to go around, but I don't think mandating people do things in our country will get people to get vaccinated. Good data, information is what encourages people to get vaccinated.
Was there too much confusion in this booster rollout process? What should have been done here differently in your view?
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion. I think first of all, the CDC, an advisory panel that the CDC uses looking at this, advised that only people that are high risk should get a booster because there's no data to show that it benefits anybody else. But then the White House, for whatever reason, was promoting a booster. And then the CDC director comes out and doesn't take the advice of the physician advisory panel and says, well, everybody should get a booster. From my standpoint, we've looked at this, the doctors in Congress, and there's no solid data to say that you should get a booster for just regular citizens that aren't elderly and don't have underlying conditions. It seems logical that it would make a difference, but there's no data to support it because We only know about antibody levels that you have in your blood, but that's not the only form of immunity that you get from a vaccine. You get what's called cellular immunity, and we haven't assessed that. So I'm right now on the fence about a booster. I don't see the scientific data supporting it, other than high-risk people who are elderly or have other underlying conditions.
We'll see how that plays out as more
Yes.
of that data
I think
comes
it's an
in.
open question at this point.
Yeah.
And I think when the data comes out that shows we should get a booster, then I'll be recommending people get boosters.
All right, Congressman Larry Bucshon, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us this week.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anytime.